All right, so get this, Thailand, it's known for being really laid back and, well, pretty good taxes too, but things are changing. We're going to deep dive into the new tax rules for expats and anyone traveling long term. And believe me, these changes are huge if you're thinking about maybe making Thailand your home base. Thailand has always been like a safe haven for people looking to, not pay a lot of taxes, BUT. That's changing. So let's talk to our expert to break down exactly what's happening.
What's really interesting is it's not like there's this brand new law or anything. The Thai Revenue Department is just reinterpreting the rules they already had. And that's a big deal because it shows how much power they have to change the game without even having to write a new law.
Okay, so it's not like they completely changed everything. It's just how they're using the rules that's different. So what's the big change that has everyone so worried?
Okay, get ready for this. So it used to be that only the money you earn and transfer to Thailand in the same year was taxable, right? Now all of your income that's accessible that ends up in a Thai bank account is taxable. It doesn't even matter when you earned it.
Hold on a second. So let's say I made some money 5 years ago working in, I don't know, Canada or something, and I transfer that money to my Thai bank account today. They're going to tax me on it like I earned it this year.
Yeah, exactly. That's why a lot of expats are freaking out, especially people who retired here. They might have been thinking about their savings from before 2024 as like their tax-free nest egg.
Yeah, that really messes up the whole retire on a Thai beach plan. So what does this mean for people who are already living in Thailand?
Well, if you're a tax resident, if you're in Thailand for 180 days or more in a year,
Yeah.
you have to be really careful about tracking all the money you bring into the country and reporting it all too. And it doesn't matter what kind of visa you have, work visa or retirement visa, even one of those fancy elite visas, it all counts.
Yeah. So no more flying under the radar, huh? Sounds like keeping really good records is going to be super important.
Definitely. And here's something else to think about. All this might make Thailand's neighbors like Malaysia or Vietnam look a lot better to expats who want to, pay less taxes.
That makes sense. Our research says this could change where expats decide to live. But it also says these changes affect long-term travelers too. What does that even mean? Is that just another way to say expats?
Not exactly. It's not just retirees or people with those long stay visas anymore. This also affects digital nomads, remote workers, or just anyone who's planning on staying in Thailand for a while. If you're spending a good chunk of time in Thailand and you're getting paid while you're there, you need to know about these new rules.
So Thailand might not be so smiley for people who aren't ready for this. What can people do right now to get prepared? This is happening pretty quickly.
The biggest thing is, like we said, keeping really detailed records. You need a clear paper trail showing how much you're making, every transfer you make to Thailand, and any conversations you have with the tax people. Don't try to remember it all or guess, just write it all down.
Good advice. But you mentioned exemptions earlier, so it's not like they're going to tax absolutely everything right. Give us some good news.
You're right, there are some exemptions. Like, let's say you got an inheritance from a relative overseas before December 31st, 2023. That would probably be exempt from these new rules. And there are other types of income that might not count as assessable income.
Okay, that's a bit of a relief. But even with the exemptions, this is starting to feel pretty complicated.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's why you really need to get advice from someone who knows what they're doing, if you're serious about living or working in Thailand long term. Especially if you're thinking about contracts or investments, talking to a Thai accountant or a tax advisor is a really good idea. They can help you figure out the rules and make sure you're doing things the right way.
That's solid advice. We've talked about a lot, the big changes, who's affected, and the first steps to get ready, but we're just scratching the surface here. Stick around because we're going to keep talking about these new tax rules in part 2 of this deep dive. Welcome back. We were just talking about how Thailand's new tax rules are like changing the game for expats and long-term travelers. So let's get into what the Thai Revenue Department actually considers accessible income. Because that seems like a pretty broad term.
You're right. It is a pretty broad term. It covers a lot of different things like your salary, your pension, dividends from any foreign investments you have, rental income from properties, even capital gains. Basically, any money you earn that goes into a Thai bank account could be taxed under these new rules.
So it's not just about where you make the money, it's about where it ends up. That's a big change for how Thailand is doing taxes, right?
It is, and this isn't just happening in Thailand. We're seeing this kind of thing all over the world. More and more countries are keeping a closer eye on what expats are doing with their money, and they're making their tax laws stricter.
I wonder if other countries are doing the same thing as Thailand. Is Thailand kind of leading the way here?
It's definitely part of a bigger trend. Governments everywhere are trying to find ways to get more money. and close those loopholes in the tax system. And they're realizing that just because someone makes money outside their country doesn't mean they can't tax it if that person is spending the money inside their country.
That makes sense. So let's say you have a rental property back in your home country,
Hmm.
and you're transferring that rental income to your Thai bank account to, pay your bills.
Yeah.
What happens then?
That rental income would probably be considered assessable income under these new rules. Remember, they're really focused on money being transferred to Thailand, not where you originally earned it.
Okay, so where the money comes from is less important than where it goes. Got it. But what about people who are just visiting Thailand? Like tourists or people who are only there for a short time? Do these rules apply to them too?
That's where things get a bit more complicated. The key thing is residency. If you're in Thailand for less than 180 days in a year, you're not considered a tax resident. So these new rules probably won't affect you. You're most likely fine.
So it's not just about being in Thailand, it's about actually living there. What about digital nomads? Those people who spend a few months in Thailand each year, working remotely and enjoying the sunshine, but then they move on to somewhere else. They're not really settling down permanently, but they're not exactly tourists either.
Those are the people who really need to pay attention and maybe even talk to a professional about it. They might need to keep track of exactly how much time they're spending in Thailand to make sure they don't stay longer than 180 days. Or they might need to be careful about how they manage their money to try to avoid paying too much in taxes.
Sounds like that could get pretty tricky, especially if you're moving around from country to country all the time.
It can be. Being organized and thinking ahead are really important. You got to keep detailed records of your travel dates and how much money you're making. That's more important now than ever.
I'm definitely seeing how important record keeping is now. What about investments, though? Like if someone wants to invest in the Thai stock market or buy property in Thailand, how do those things fit into these new tax rules?
That's another area where it's a good idea to talk to a tax expert, someone who really understands the Thai system. Figuring out the taxes on investments can be complicated. It depends on what kind of investment you're making, how long you hold on to it, and you guessed it, your residency status.
Right, because even if you're not a resident, there might still be taxes on your investments in Thailand, like capital gains taxes.
Exactly. And don't forget about those exemptions we talked about earlier. They might apply to some investments too, so it's really important to know all the details.
It seems like the more we talk about these new rules, the more complicated they get.
Tax rules are rarely simple, that's for sure. But if you take the time to understand these changes and get help from an expert when you need it, you'll be able to figure it all out.
All right, listeners, I hope you're taking notes. We've talked about what assessable income really means and about what these changes mean for investors and why knowing your residency status is so important. But we're not done yet. Come back for the last part of this deep dive where we'll answer some common questions and talk about what these changes might mean for Thailand's future as a place for expats. Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive on these new tax rules in Thailand. We've covered a lot, but I'm sure people still have questions. So let's just jump right in and talk about something I think is on everyone's mind. What if someone just ignores these new rules? Like, is the Thai government really going to come knocking on everyone's door to make sure they're paying their taxes?
Well, it's not really like they're going to have a tax patrol going door to door or anything like that. But the Thai Revenue Department is definitely getting better at keeping track of money moving around. And they're collecting more data. And listen, there can be some pretty serious consequences if you don't follow the rules. We're talking fines, penalties, even problems with your visa later on.
So pretending it's not happening isn't a good plan. But what if someone is really trying to do the right thing, but they make a mistake? Like maybe they forget to report a small transfer or they mess up their calculations. What happens then?
The important thing is to be honest and open about it. If you realize you've made a mistake, the best thing you can do is contact the Thai Revenue Department right away and explain what happened. They're usually pretty understanding if it's clear that you were trying to do the right thing.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Sounds like they're not trying to punish people.
Yeah.
Who are genuinely trying to figure all this out.
Yeah.
I imagine this is causing a lot of stress and confusion for people, though. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by all of this?
First of all, don't panic. Just take a deep breath and remember that knowledge is power. Start by getting organized. Get all your financial records together, track your income and any transfers you make, and be absolutely sure you know what your residency status is. Then talk to a good Thai accountant or tax advisor. They can look at your situation and help you come up with a tax plan that works for you.
Great advice. So basically, Thailand is still an awesome place to live and travel. But you just got to be aware of these new tax rules and do what you need to do to follow them.
Exactly. And this whole situation really shows you what's happening all over the world. As the world gets more connected, governments are trying harder to tax income that's earned globally. So whether you're drawn to Thailand for its beaches, its culture, or its business opportunities, just make sure you do your research plan ahead and stay informed about the changing tax laws.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, that's the end of our deep dive into Thailand's new tax rules. I hope you found this episode helpful and maybe even a little bit encouraging. Knowing how to handle these changes can give you the confidence to make good decisions about your future. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another exciting adventure in the world of knowledge.